Hi, everyone. Sorry for the pause. Welcome to the Bay Area Content Marketing Meetup. Today, we are lucky to have Carlos Hidalgo. Carlos is an accomplished sales and marketing executive, but today Carlos will not be talking about sales or marketing. For the most part, he's going to, the title of Carlos's talk is Fulfillment, Contentment, and Joy, Designing a Life You Love to Live. According to recent research, 75% of professionals state they feel stuck both personally and professionally. There are many reasons for this, but the fact is that you don't have to stay stuck. You can design a life you love to live every day and find contentment and joy. Carlos is going to share lessons he's learned and how he applies them to his life to ensure his life is designed with purpose and meaning, and how it has nothing to do with his job. Carlos is also author of the book, The Un-American Dream, Finding Personal and Professional Happiness, Establishing Work-Life Boundaries. Carlos, thanks for joining us today, and take it away.
Thanks, Dennis. It's really great to be here. As Dennis mentioned, I have spent my entire almost 30-year career in B2B sales and marketing. It's hard to believe it's been almost 30 years. It goes fast. It's been a great career. And much of what I want to share with you all today is really based on my own life. Dennis referenced my book, The Un-American Dream, which I published in 2019. This year will actually be 4 years. So June of 19 is when it came out. And that book was really also based on what I had experienced. I at one point had founded an agency. In 2005, I left the software world. I had been with McAfee and BMC leading global teams, started an agency and really allowed that agency to dominate my life. And then in 2016, when I decided to leave that agency, I had so many agency owners and executives that I had worked with reach out to me and just ask, how did you do that? What did you do? And the reality was I literally just pulled the ripcord. I didn't have a fallback plan. I didn't have any kind of big savings. Sure as heck, if you've ever sat on the agency side, didn't have a big buyout. But I knew I had to get my life back. And that was the start of this journey. What I've done since then, I've done some life coaching, not so much into that anymore. Actually, I'm about to launch another agency. So I guess that old habits die hard. But life design really came as a result of conversations my wife and I had as our youngest was getting ready to leave for college. We actually started around his sophomore year of high school saying, what does the next phase of our lives look like? And what do we want to do? We had started with just moving to Europe for a year and country hopping and finding Airbnbs to stay in and just exploring working, but exploring Europe. And then that little thing that disrupted all of our lives, COVID, happened. And that quickly went by the wayside. And believe it or not, we actually did something pretty dramatic. We ended up moving into an RV full time. And we spent 9 months in that RV. We saw 11 different states over those 9 months. I worked from the RV. And one of the things that we kept hearing from people is, oh, we wish we could do that. And my response to them was always the same. Why can't you? And so from that came life design. I found in talking to what I refer to as my people, my tribe, sales and marketing professionals, that all of us strive to have contentment. We want fulfillment. And above all, I mean, if you just look at the media today, we all need a little bit of joy. And I hope that in the time we have together, that I can convey some of that to you. And please feel free to ask questions. I see some stuff going on in the chat. I'm not sure if I open that chat that, oh, well, thanks for that, Rich and Dennis. And I'll keep that chat window open. If you have a chat question, feel free to put that in the chat or just raise your hand and ask it. And I'd rather this be conversational than me just going through a bunch of slides. So I've yet to ask anybody this question of who wants to be successful, and nobody raised their hand. So can I assume on this call Everybody wants to be successful. Let's put it this way. If you don't want to be successful, raise your hand. Okay, so everybody wants to be successful. I actually asked that question once from the stage, and I kid you not, there was a guy in the audience who kind of like grabbed his chin and looked up, and then he was like, it was kind of hilarious. I didn't call him out on it, but I just thought it was so funny that he had to think about this. But you know, in our Western culture, especially if you follow any of the hustle gurus out there, which I abhor that whole hustle content. You know, everybody has their idea of what success is. You can even go buy a poster on it if you really want this motivational art quote. If that's a bit of an eye chart, I apologize. I picture this being on the wall of like a sweatshop, telemarketing firm or something like that, or a sales manager who's just, you know, watched too much of Coffee is for Closers and wants to go get this. So if this is your definition of success, would love to talk to you about that. Because obviously, you know, if you're not hustling, grinding, executing, have the talent or grit, you're not going to be successful according to this poster. According to this individual who, you know, only 20 people know this success formula based on the followers here. Here's your 6-step process for success. There's hard work, value. You got to have a plan, which I don't disagree with. Persistency, consistency, and patience. So if you want to be successful and follow passion here, feel free to follow those things. This was my real favorite as I started to look at this from this Income Buddies, is you got to have a wealth mindset. Interesting that he's defining wealth as success. I know a lot of wealthy people, and I would not say they was success. You have to have thoughts. That's it. I'm not sure what the thoughts have to be. I would assume the thoughts have to be focused on some sort of wealth, but just a wealth mindset and then thoughts. And then you have to have massive action. And that's going to give you results. So even a simpler formula to success, and you too can find this if you just do a search on Google. It's amazing the things that you find. And then, you know, Walter Chrysler just said the real secret is just be enthusiastic. I'm a pretty outgoing individual. I'm pretty extroverted. I feel like I'm enthusiastic about just about everything I put my mind into. Don't get me started on Yankees baseball. Very enthusiastic there. Hope I haven't turned any of you off. But I know I've got a fan there, a fellow fan with Dennis. But you know, enthusiasm does not lead to success. So what I want to talk about is because I think success and contentment and joy are so intertwined, and I'm hopefully today going to break down some of this idea of what we see success is. I want to focus on that second 1B definition. It's a favorable or desired outcome. Now, it's interesting there that it says the attainment of wealth, favor, or eminence. Let's focus on the first part of 1B, favored or desirable outcome. Elizabeth, I'll pass that along to my wife. She's a huge, huge Dodger fan. But I want you to think about success as that in particular, a favorable or desired outcome, because I think when we think about wealth, when we think about our jobs, when we think about our positions, when we think about our careers, and that's much of what the Un-American Dream is about, is that we put so much stock in our job title, in our roles, in our career, and we look to that to define success. The reality is that your job title, your job role is the least interesting thing about you. And I know based on my own experience that I put so much stock in the growth of my company and the growth of my agency, in the, you know, how was I speaking, was I getting published, and all these things that at the end of the day, just, you know, really didn't matter. Were they important? Sure, because they're part of my work, and our work is important. But it in our American culture, especially, we allow it to consume us, and we start to attribute that to our identity and our success. And I found this study by Gallup, and I thought this was so amazing. So what you're seeing here on the left right here is, this is what my own personal, this is the poll. They polled people and said, what is your total composition? What makes up success? And then on the right, it was, what did we perceive those in society, or even better yet, our close circle, our societal circle, perceived was success? So look at the difference here. First of all, 17.1 said their personal definition is education. I actually found it a little alarming and somewhat sad that relationship was below education, right? We are wired for connection as human beings. We are wired for relationship. Yet personally, the respondents to the study said, well, if I'm going to look at the total composition of success, it goes first by education, then by my relationships, followed closely by character, and then finance. So we still see the finance. Now, if we look at what we believe society wants, look at the status. 45.9% say that's what society deems, or that's how I feel like my circle, my societal circle deems as success. And I found it so interesting that the study says this, and this, when I saw this, I had to read it twice. So specifically, the disconnect between our personal views of success and our perception of how others in society views success suggests that the time and effort Americans invest in certain pursuits may not help them achieve success according to their own definition. And I want to have that, it was supposed to animate there, sorry guys, but if you look at that orange print, how much time are we chasing success, fulfillment, contentment, joy, but we're chasing the wrong things? And based on my own experience and those that I've talked to over the last 4 or 5 years, I'm going to be hard pressed to be convinced that so much of what we chase, how we chase success, contentment, fulfillment, always comes back to what we do. And again, I'll state again, what we do is the least interesting part about us, and what we do actually does prevent us oftentimes from living a life that we love to live. So I believe fundamentally that most in America live to work, where we really should be working to live. And we're going to get to a life design model here in a little bit. And so I think it may be one of the reasons why we're so unhappy. So if you look at this study from 20 to 21, and just so you know, this was happening long before COVID. A lot of people want to blame COVID for their unhappiness and their stress and lack of contentment. But this is, we're actually seeing this year over year continue to, the not too happy is far outweighing the very happy here in America. And it's actually pretty alarming. And we have, we are arguably the most prosperous, we are the most successful, quote unquote, country in the history of the world. Yet there's so much anger, there's so much anxiety, there's so much stress, and there's so much worry. So what does impact our success? What impacts our success? What impacts our lives and our feelings of contentment? I just threw a bunch of things up there. Anybody who's in a corporate role or even working with clients, how about unrealistic deadlines? Right? It's hey, I need this yesterday. I once had a salesperson. I don't know how he found my home address, but he sent me a envelope in the mail that said, how hard is this? And he had mocked up this content piece that I had told him was going to take a couple of weeks. I was like, this is crazy. Like, you had that much time? Quest for perfection. I love that. Right? Perfectionism. I've got a whole thing on perfectionism we won't get into. Our finances, our expectations. Expectations is huge. This other one down here, which I see on LinkedIn quite a bit, imposter syndrome, which is a professional word or a professional phrase that we've used for shame. It's really shame. It's that little voice in our head that tells us we're not good enough, we're not smart enough, we're not gonna do well on this thing. I'll tell you, it's something that we never outgrow because we're human. It's an unfortunate part of the human condition, but it's something that we can push against. But all of these things and more contribute to a lack of contentment, contribute to a lack of joy, and contribute to a lack of fulfillment. And so I want to talk about how we can, within our lives, say, I can find contentment, I can choose contentment, I can choose joy, even despite my circumstances, and I can design the life that I want to live and include my job, my role as part of that. So in order to do that, we have to ask some questions. Now, again, as I told you, what I am presenting is not based on any kind of science. It's not based on anybody's, I've been asked that before, is what's your process? This is based on my own life, where I put everything I had into my business. I neglected my family. I neglected my marriage. I talk about that in the book. If you Google me and some podcasts, you'll probably hear a deeper part of the story. But I had to go through some of these questions for my own self. And so I thought it quite appropriate for us to explore these today. And, you can answer these to yourself. You can write them down, or you can drop them in the chat if you feel so bold. And yes, Dennis, good point. A good or a bad boss can really, really have an impact. I don't believe, I know in the intro there of the book talks about work-life boundaries. Little secret, that was more for SEO perspective. I actually believe in life boundaries, and we're going to talk about that when we talk about the life design model that I share with people. But let's jump in and ask some of these questions. Oh, wrong direction here. So, can you relate to this statement? Dennis read this when he gave me my introduction. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand. 75% feel stuck personally and professionally. That's an alarming, huge percentage. I know I was there. I talk to people all the time who feel that way. Being stuck is not a great feeling. Being stuck makes it hard to get excited about anything. Being stuck just makes it feel like you're on that hamster wheel. You're on that treadmill. I moved back up here to the Adirondacks, which I've kind of viewed as my hometown for a long time. And, we live a pretty simple life. We don't have some magnificent house. We bought an 1888 Victorian. We bought it on FaceTime. I don't ever recommend that. But we revamped the whole thing. We live in it's just my wife and I, we live in 1,000 square feet. I can walk to one of the 2 restaurants in town. We don't have a stoplight. But I got to tell you, I love my life. I love the way we live. I don't feel like we lack anything. And I'm so glad that I was able to move away from this statement. And that's what I want to share with you. And if this resonates, I would love to talk to you more. The reality is that if you're feeling stuck, I want to give you some hope. You can change. Now, there may be things in your life that you're dealing with right now. It may be a sick parent that you're taking care of. It may be a relative. It may be a broken relationship. All of those things, of course, add complexity, pain, and hurt into our lives. And I don't want to diminish those. But the reality is we can change. But here's the truth. Until the pain and dissatisfaction of how you're living outweighs your fear of change, you'll never make a move forward to start to design the life you love. And I speak to more people. I wish I could say I speak to more people who want to design that life and want to move forward. But I speak to more people who get really excited about doing some of the work. And then when it comes to the change, they go, not going to do that. Not going to move forward. Thanks for the time, and we have all these excuses. And what it really means is that the pain, the fear, and the dissatisfaction of how you're living doesn't outweigh that fear of change. Because as human beings, we don't like change. We don't really like change. I know some people thrive on it, but the reality is We like the known, we don't like the unknown. But let me offer you hope. You can change. You can change how you're living your life, and you don't have to worry about the expectations of others. So where does this start? Well, it starts by asking this question, who are you? How do you identify? Now, I know identity is a huge thing, and I'm really talking about who are you at your core? And what I talk to people about is, who did God create you to be? And the best way I know to do this is to get back to like your 6 or 7-year-old self. We have some neighbors here in our town, and they have 3 little children, and the daughter is 6, the son is 4, and then they have a toddler. Well, the 6 and the 4-year-old were over this weekend as we were working in the yard. And my wife and I were just talking about, kids are like the greatest ever because they just say what comes into their minds, right? So we're doing some yard work, and the girl, says something like, "Oh, that's not working real well." And I'm like, "Yep, you're right. It's not." And, there's none of that inhibition. And when we think about who we are now as adults, the only change between that 6 and 7-year-old innocence and where we are is there's complexity. We now cue into social norms, but there's also a lot of lies that we've come to believe about ourselves that have been heaped on us the first time we were rejected, first time we were cut from the team, first time we were fired, first time we didn't get the job, first time we had a broken relationship. And all of these things pile onto us. So what happens is we start to believe more of the lies than we do the truth about who we are. And so I know for me, early on, I was told I was lazy, I wasn't smart, I wasn't going to cut it. And so my whole purpose in life became proving everybody wrong. And in the process, I became really angry. And anytime I had a success, I wanted to shove it in everybody's face. Well, that's not really a purpose. That's more living life with a chip on your shoulder. And I can tell you, it's really no way to live. So if you want to start to design that life you want so you can find joy, contentment, and fulfillment, you got to get back to who God created you to be at your core. Take off all of those lies and that facade that so many of us wear, and really get back to who you are and embrace it. And I got to tell you, I was 44 years old before I was finally able to look in the mirror and truly say, warts and all, flaws and all, I love who I am. And that's a long time to go with trying to be something that you're not. Once we identify who we are, then we can identify our purpose. Now, the famous TED Talk by Simon Sinek, I almost drew a blank on his name there, right? Find your why. Everybody wanted to do the why. Now, the thing is, Sinek was talking to brands, but it's still a good message. And I see this on LinkedIn as well, right? Our why is, or my why is, my big why. Well, we can't properly identify our purpose if we're operating off a false identity. And that was my story that I just told you. How can I identify my big why if I don't understand who I am first? Once I understand who I am, then I can identify my purpose. And my purpose, pretty simply, is I want to help people reach their full potential. It doesn't matter if I'm working with a client in the marketing and sales realm. It doesn't matter if I'm helping a friend. It doesn't matter if I'm giving some advice to someone younger than me. I just want to help people reach their full potential. And I believe that's my purpose here in life. And so I use my gifts and my creativity to fulfill that purpose, but I wasn't able to tap into that purpose until I properly got rooted in my identity. Now, once I have my purpose defined, this is where my talents come in. Now, I've helped people define that purpose, or when I tell them my purpose, they go, well, that's not anything really huge, right? So you help people reach their full potential. That's pretty simplistic. But here's the thing with your unique gifts and talents. And Rich, you put it here, right? We're all unique, just like everyone else, which I love. But because of our uniqueness, the only person who can fulfill my purpose the way I can is me, because I have unique gifts and talents. that are unique to me. You have gifts. All of you on this call have gifts and talents that are uniquely yours, which means only you can fulfill your purpose the way you can. It starts to really change our definition of success, which then make finding contentment, joy, and fulfillment a whole lot better. Now, going back to purpose and then using our talents, so many of us, I hear this, I want to find purpose in my job. I want a job that gives me purpose. Your job will not give you purpose. Your job is a great place to apply your purpose. It's a lousy place to find it. Now, I just told you I like to help people make impact. That's why when I connected with Dennis, I think we had been LinkedIn buddies for a couple of years, and then we finally were able to connect on the phone. And he told me about this. Well, I hope one of the ways I'm helping make an impact is by having this talk with you all. I hope that the client I met with earlier today, I hope I'm making them make an impact, and I'm using my talents and my gifts. And again, going back to the identity piece, I wasn't able to fully embrace my talents and gifts and love those that I've been given until I got back to that foundation of who was I created to be. So we have identity, we have purpose, we have gifts and talents. And once I lock in that, I am here to tell you the opportunities that you will be able to identify will be unlimited. You will start to view things in a different way. You will start to respond to people in a different way and start to think about things in a way that you never did before. Now, this isn't just a one-time exercise. I talked about the shame. I talked about imposter syndrome. Brene Brown talks about shame resilience because, again, this is indeed part of the human condition. So this is a constant, approach to what do I do? Who am I? Remember my purpose, getting back to even today, earlier today, I was thinking like, I'm talking to a content marketing meetup about this stuff. These people aren't going to care about this. And it was that little voice just going, you're going to suck. You're going to suck. But the reality is, I said, this is an opportunity that I was given because Dennis and I connected. So yeah, I'm going to take it. And you know what? If only one person is impacted, then my purpose has been fulfilled and I can be happy about that. And so I would encourage you to start to look for these opportunities. Know which ones to say no to, because as my wife says, your no is someone else's yes. And then learn to and start to understand the ones to say yes to. So this brings me all to life design. Now, I've seen life coaches, I've seen plans that have 12 things, 8 things, 3 things, whatever. I have 6. I believe in our lives, first of all, we all have 168 hours each week. When we talk about work-life boundaries, balance, harmony, integration, the reality is it's the only thing in our life that we try to separate. Nobody talks about kids' life balance or marriage life balance. We don't talk about finance life balance. You get the picture. But we talk about work-life balance. And when we try to separate work from life, the only thing we do is make life more complicated. So we have 168 hours. And if Elon Musk hasn't figured out how to create time yet, then I don't think we will either. Not on this call anyway. So we're all bound by time. Work is part of that 168 hours, as is having to run errands, hopefully working out and taking care of yourself physically, tending and nurturing our relationships with our significant others, husbands, wives, etc., our children, our friends, our extended family, and you see how this all starts to grow. So I look at mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, relational, and financial. Now, what's the one thing missing from here that I don't put in here as a call out? Work. Because work can impact us mentally, certainly financially. It can impact us emotionally. Dennis, you talked just in the chat, talked about the impact of a boss that we bring that home. So our relationships. I've seen people endure so much stress in their jobs because of their boss, where physically it impacts them and spiritually it impacts them. So work is involved in all of these things. Now, what we need to do is we need to think about what priorities do we have across these 6 different elements, and what do we want our life to look like? So if I wanted my life to be one where it was fast paced, it was this, I surely wouldn't live here where I live now, because on a good day, we have under 1,000 full-time residents. We don't even have a stoplight. I don't even lock my doors at night. So it's hardly fast paced. Clearly, I wanted a life. Rich, I think you were out on your mountain bike. I had somebody ask me once, so are there any green spaces around you? I said, I live in a 6 million acre green space. You know, when I want to go fish, I grab my tackle box and my fishing pole, and in 5 minutes, my line's in the water. So that's the kind of life that I wanted. That's the kind of life my wife and I wanted. So we got to do that together. So think about all of these different areas and what you want out of your life, and then set boundaries around those things. We should set boundaries around our relationships. I would implore you that when you're with your relationships, keep these things away from you. I see so many times we are so addicted to the phone or the buzz or the ding or the alert, and it oftentimes becomes the third person in that relationship. Our kids notice that when we're so distracted. Put a boundary around your work. Your work is vital. It's important. It's noble. We should put a boundary around that. We should put a boundary around taking care of ourselves mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. One of the things I do is I put a workout into my calendar every day, and I treat it like it's a meeting. Now, sometimes it has to be abbreviated, but I make sure I'm getting that time to take care of myself, because I also know how it benefits me emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. I set a time each day for spiritual rejuvenation and spiritual connection. I set those boundaries because those are the things that are important to me. And the reality is, your boundaries don't need to be grand, but they need to be established. And if you are trying to balance, 70% of professionals say they struggle to find work-life balance. And that's because it's very, very hard to balance anything. And it doesn't take a whole lot to get knocked off balance. And we're seeing that in our absolutely crazy breakneck pace world that we live in. And so these are the 6 elements I would encourage you to think about. I love this quote by Carol Burnett. I think one of the funniest people that ever walked the face of the earth. But she says, only I can change my life. No one can do it for me. The reality is, I can't change your life. Your partner can't change your life. Your boss can impact, but maybe won't change your life. The only one who can make that choice is you. And so if this has resonated with you, here's what I would ask you to do. Tonight, on your own, with your partner, if you have one, sit down and just start to write out, what do I want this to look like? It doesn't mean it's going to change tomorrow, but you have to have some sort of description of what you want life to look like. Also write down things you don't want life to look like. And then say, all right, now what do I need to do? Or maybe what do I need to let go in order to achieve this type of life? And again, you may have some work to do. You may have some work to do in the emotional and the physical and the spiritual realm. You may have some work to do in the financial realm, but be persistent and just each day take a step forward to design that life. If you're struggling with the identity, purpose, talent, and opportunity piece, you start with the talent and just write down every lie you've come to believe about yourself, and then counteract that and write down what you know to be true. Maybe a long exercise, it may be a painful exercise, but it may be a cleansing exercise for you where it helps you get through this. And then keep that list of truths by your side. Keep it in a place where you can read it and have that reinforced. So now when you hear that voice of shame, you can say, yeah, you know what? This may not go so great, and I still know all of these things about me. And you can embrace the and rather than defend. And yes, Rich, write it down. Don't do it in your head. Write it down. I suggest writing it down by hand. not typing it on a computer. But those are two practical things you can start to do. And then lastly, regardless of your circumstances, you can choose joy and you can choose contentment and you can choose to be fulfilled, regardless of what career you have, regardless of the circumstance that you find yourself in. Joy is a choice, and it's a choice that we can make. And by God, I think we all need it, because our world today seems like it is in complete disarray, and there are so many angry people out there. And so maybe that's a result of you buying in too much into what success looks like. And the reality is only you can define what success looks like for you. So that's all I have. You can actually, this will not go to the site anymore, but you can still email me here if you want to connect, or just hit me up on LinkedIn. I would love to chat with you and have that discussion. But thanks for the time. And if you guys want to have any questions in the chat, I'm happy to answer any, or any comments. Happy to have a discussion. I think we have some time left.
Thank you very much, Carlos. So yeah, we got a bunch of positive compliments in the chat, and also even on Twitter, there's been some tweets commending your talk. I guess I'll start with a question, and others feel free to follow either by speaking it, or you can put it in the chat. So my question is on, let's see. So let's just say for those of us that are adults, we're all adults, right? For those of us who are parents, we've got obligations like a mortgage, and we have to pay for our kids' college. So that's a pretty big burden financially. A full-time job tends to address that in general. But if you go through your exercise, maybe a full-time job is not what that exercise adds up to. So it's some other thing, almost like how you're doing the life design consulting. But sometimes there's not a clear path from what you really love to do to the necessary income to meet your obligations. Do you have any advice on, like, how do you navigate to get the necessary financial gain to meet your obligations?
Yeah, I think first of all, you have to be realistic and realize it's a plan. And I told you, my wife and I started these discussions earnestly when our son was, I think, in his sophomore year of high school. And then we didn't sell our home and move out of things until 2020. But one of the things we determined we wanted to do was travel together. And so it was easy with him being 17 to say, Mom's coming with me on a business trip. And, if you're going to throw a party, make sure it's cleaned up by the time we get home. The other thing too is to understand that your life design plan will change based on, you mentioned kids. My wife and I are empty nesters, so it gives us a little bit more freedom. If we had done this when my kids were little, it would have looked a lot different, because we do have the commitments. There are things like a mortgage. However, I think sometimes we expect, well, we got to have this and this and this as part of our home. The question is do you really? I mean, my wife and I, as I mentioned, we live in 1,000 square feet. We have one bedroom and a galley kitchen. It's not a big house. My parents really struggled with, like, well, where else is there room? And I'm like, wait, yeah, there's not. Now we have an upstairs, but we don't frequent that, and we actually Airbnb it. So it's got its own private entrance and things like that. So it really has to depend. And then thirdly, and this may be controversial, I don't know that you have to pay for your kids' college tuition. It'd be great, but we had an agreement with our kids that, hey, we're going to be investing in things that have a really good return. So we want to see you give it your best effort in high school. Now, it didn't mean straight A's, but we knew what they were capable of. I had 4 children. My daughter was the only one who took advantage of that, where she did apply herself. She got academic money, so we paid for her school. My middle son was blessed with athleticism, so he played baseball for 4 years and got it paid for. The other 2, they were on their own. Now they had the option to kind of, re-engage as they went into college, but we made that deal. And when our oldest son went to school, he had to pay for it on his own because he didn't live up to his end of the deal. So there's things like that you can do, but I think the expectation of what we think we should do versus what really works for us, sometimes that expectation can cloud our judgment.
Makes sense. I see some people unmuted, so if you have a question, feel free to speak it now. Ingrid?
Hi, Ingrid.
Hi, Carlos. I love your talk for so many reasons. That your title, "The Un-American Dream." I mean, not only is it a cool, catchy title for like content marketing, but it's really, I mean, you have like a revolution going on here, and I love how, but how like you embody. You're totally an American dude. You know what I mean? Like you're the right person to extend this message, and I feel like we're one of the right audiences for your message, because obviously if we're like corporate content marketing types, we kind of bought into what to some degree we bought into like what our career should be. So I love how you bust that up immediately. Like you show how your statistics of like how much emphasis we put on status when it's such a tiny part of like actual fulfillment.
Right.
I guess I have two questions. Because I feel like I have embraced a lot of what you said in the last, I mean, just on my own in the last 12 years, I've landed on that, and I've had created pretty good balance and fulfillment. The one area where I haven't is in exercise. I used to like be a big time runner and marathoner and stuff now, and I do have my child is younger. Maybe it's part of like having younger kids. That's like the one thing where I kind of, with kids, I gave it up and I eat well, but I don't put in the time for exercise. It does take time. So I have a question. Do you have any thought on that? And then secondly, what is your thought about the fact that so many kids in the US are going into so much debt by taking so much student, for the idea of like the un-American dream? You kind of hit on it, but we become like these indentured servants because we have put so much value on education, but we pay through the nose for it. So anyway, just if you have any like immediate thoughts.
Yeah, on the exercise thing, I would just really encourage you to take a week, take maybe 2 weeks, even a month, and be really mindful. And if you have to, journal it down of what did my days look like? And you say, well, every day is different. The reality is a lot of our days have routine, and routine is not a bad thing. It kind of gets a bad rap. And then say, you know what? This is something I want to get back into. I have young children, so I know I can't be training for a marathon. I'm actually going to be starting to train for one in June. It's a 6-day-a-week endeavor if you include 7 days, but 1 day is a rest day. Could I have done that when I had really small children? Well, if I wanted to get up at 5 a.m. and run, and I don't want to run at 5 a.m. So, but take a look at that and say, okay, are there any days that are similar, whether it's a Saturday morning or a Wednesday afternoon where I know I have these breaks, and then say, I'm going to use my calendar and this is my workout time. Doesn't have to be 2 hours. It can be 45 minutes, even if it's just a walk around the block, right? At a fast pace, whatever's going to invigorate you to do that. One of the things I love about when I run outside is I don't run with headphones. So for me, it's not only the physical, I think I get to, I do a lot of praying when I run and things like that. So for me, it's like all of these different pieces shoved into a 45-minute to a 1-hour run. And it's, for me, that is the runner's high. So I
a quick comment on that is you better believe I use my calendar for work commitments. So why not use a little bit of that calendaring for exercise? Yeah.
Yeah, you own your calendar, right? And depending on how you set it up, if you use something like a Calendly, you can actually put blocks between, don't allow anybody to book 15 minutes before, 15 minutes after a meeting. And I didn't even get to ultradian rhythms, but look that up. I'll just type that in the chat. We all have them and they're very important, and you can get more done in less time if you align to your ultradian rhythms, which I do, which means I work in sprints. On the debt thing, so I've had some people tell me I'm nuts, other people align to it. When I think about college, I think by and large today, and some of the bigger corporations like Google and Apple are starting to see this and experiment a little bit. Unless you're going for a highly specialized degree, my personal opinion is that college is overrated. I look at what I do today. The biggest thing I took from college, and I was never a great student, so I never let school, or I never let my education interfere with school. I had a really good time, but the one thing I took away from university was my 2 years on the debate team, because that's where I had learned how to do research. I learned how to speak extemporaneously. I had to think, rapid thought, analyze, critical theory. I love that time. But other than that, the classes didn't really help me do what I do. The way I got to where I am in business was by getting in, finding mentors, and doing the work. I also think there's this, back to the status, like what school are you going to? The reality is, who cares, right? Nobody asks me where I go to school anymore. That mattered in my first job. So I think this whole idea, like, oh, I've got to get to a Stanford, I've got to get to Ivy League, when I lived in Texas, it was like, you got to be to UT. Well, do you? And so we're spending hordes of money, our kids are, because, they don't want to tell their friends that, well, I take school online, because that's not a status thing. Well, we got to get rid of that status and realize that the education you're going to get is going to be good enough to get your first job. And then after that, as we all know, so much is going to depend on your network.
Thank you.
I think we have a few more minutes if there's any other thoughts.
I had a comment and a question, if you can hear me. Carlos, thanks so much for presenting to us. The comment, I like that you start with, how do we define success? Because that's subjective and personal, success in our lives. But also, if I could tie it back to the meetup, all of us as marketers, whether in content marketing or campaigns or field or whatever, I think where we've worked on projects where success, the definition hasn't been clear from the get-go, and or the success is over-rotated on business results and not so much on serving audience customer needs. Those are some disastrous experiences we've had that we want to avoid. So being clear on how are we defining success up front is important, not just, I think in all aspects, the way you had it on that screenshot, right? My question is, how might we evolve as we age, right, in different phases of life? Because where I am now in a sandwich generation, we're raising our 12-year-old sixth grader, we're caring for our 80-year-old parents, is different than where I was, a couple decades ago, et cetera. How might we apply the work that you do to different phases of our lives?
Yeah, I think you have, first of all, you should plan for the next phase of your life. Like I said, my wife and I wanted to make sure, especially after, everything we had been through, that we didn't want to be part of the gray, they call it the gray divorce statistic, right? People who divorce after their kids leave because they realize they built a life around their kids. And now that their kids are gone, they don't really have anything there. So planning for that. I also think there's a lot of, we lack enjoyment of where we are, right? We're always, so while I said planning, let me speak of the other side of my mouth and say, really enjoy where we're at. So, my mom's been, over the last 10 days, has been pretty ill. And, my mom's 82. So the reality is, mom's not, none of us are going to last forever, but, mom's, I don't know how much time she has left. So I'm so thankful that we're going to be out there in 2 weeks to spend that time with her. And I just plan to enjoy that. I don't know if that'll be the last time I see her, but I'm going to soak in every moment. So I think as our lives evolve, that whole planning, designing, framing out what we want it to be, that's an iterative process. We should be always doing that. My wife and I always talk about, we'll often start a conversation that says, I'm just spitballing, but what if we, and then we just have a conversation. And so we have thrown so much stuff against the wall. When she threw out the RV idea, I was like, you got to be kidding. But then she got really smart because she said, if we got a fifth wheel and we got a truck, I don't know what she said after truck, but I was in, right? So we just,
Great.
and then to her point, which I love, she always says, look, if we don't like it, we just stop doing it.
Yeah.
But we should try it. So I would say try it. If it's something that you, if you're married, if you have a partner, if you want to do it, try it. Nobody's saying you got to do it forever. The expectation may be, oh, you guys didn't, you bought the lake house and now you sold it. Yeah, we did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who
Well,
cares?
again, thank you for your talk. Sorry to hear about your mom, and thank you for answering my question.
Absolutely. Thanks. Enjoy the rest of your ride.
We have time for one more question. Saurabh, did I see you raise your hand or no? No. Okay. Anyone with a final question, you can unmute yourself or use the chat. And Carlos, one more time, I know you had it on your last slide. What is the website or the domain we should visit to check out your life design?
Actually, we have decommissioned that site.
Oh, okay.
So I'm just now giving talks because there was a bunch on there, too much to change and not enough time.
Okay.
So I have the web guy just say, take it down. I still do get emails to the life design journey site.
Okay.
Tomorrow on LinkedIn, I'll be announcing our new agency venture that we're getting into. So no
Very
no
exciting.
rest for the weary.
Oh,
Well-
show us your email address again, though, or tell us your email address again.
Put it here. There it is in the chat.
All right. Thanks, Carlos. And you'll have to come back after your agency is launched and we'll do another talk. Thanks. So
Yeah,
good
maybe-
luck with the launch.
Maybe I'll do one on content. Absolutely.
This one was different, but different in a great way. So we really enjoyed it today.
Well,
Thanks
thanks
for
for
the
the
time.
opportunity.
Sure
Good
thing.
to see you all. Take care.
Thanks, Charles.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.